Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all of you. I am Tasneem Amatullah, Assistant Professor of Educational Leadership at the Emirates College for Advanced Education in the UAE. As is the theme of this conference, we are aware that Muslim women play a major role in the workforce in the Middle East and North Africa region. Women hold diverse positions, from political leaders to senior leaders to educators, doctors, engineers, and many more. But yet, in many parts of the world, Muslim women are perceived as oppressed because of the negative cultural stereotypes that are embedded in the society and that which are often reiterated in the media. In this presentation, I share a counter-narrative, an empowering narrative of a female Muslim leader in higher education context in Qatar. I examine the educational leadership experiences of a female leader in Qatar in the field of higher education and the ways she maneuvers her leadership role in the light of Islamic leadership theory and practice. The central guiding question used for this study is, how does a female educational leader narrate her leadership experience in higher education in Qatar? Considering the unique landscape of Qatar, a nation which is deeply rooted in Islamic values and Sharia serves as its legislative law, Qatar stands as a progressive example of practicing Islam, particularly within its education system. In Qatar, the education system takes an innovative approach by integrating Islamic values and teachings into the curriculum while simultaneously nurturing critical thinking and preparing students for the workforce. The Ministry of Education in Qatar oversees both the K-12 and higher education system. Qatar National Vision 2030 is very much aligned with the education system, where they are aiming to develop and sustain the human capacity in the nation so the economic workforce, the prosperity happens, and then the nation actually moves to a knowledge-based economy. Education leadership actually stands out as one of the fields where Qatari women have made significant impact. Now, in this context, when I delve into the narrative of a female Qatari educational leader in higher education, exploring how she basically navigates her leadership role. Qatar's unique blend of Islamic values and progressive education initiatives combined with this evolving role of women in leadership provides a very fascinating backdrop for my exploration of educational leadership in the Middle East. Now, this study highlights the dynamic and evolving landscape of leadership in Qatar, with a particular focus on the contributions of female leaders in the educational sphere. With Islamic leadership framework as the theoretical framework of my study, it is vital to explore and understand the dimensions of Islamic leadership. As you know, the literature is really scarce, but often Muslim nations resort to adopting Western leadership theories because it is definitely, much researched about, much written about. But also at the same time, we don't have much written about Islamic leadership insights. However, the Islamic leadership literature is actually growing rapidly, and scholars have been studying in different contexts and from a wide variety of perspectives these days. It includes culturally relevant leadership, spiritual leadership, educational leadership stories of Muslim women, the school culture, Muslim identity, Islamic school leadership and social justice, women's narratives around gender and stereotypes, and much more. Even introduced recently a balanced leadership model from an Islamic perspective. So, as I was reading through the literature, two definitions I draw from for my study is that first comes from Rost, an educational leadership scholar, where he says educational leadership is a dynamic interaction between the leaders, followers, and situations. And the second one is that from Bikun and Bababi, that Islamic leadership is considered as a sacred trust and amana, reflecting a commitment to guide, protect, and treat followers justly. So Islamic leadership basically draws inspiration from the Quran and the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, echoing a dual nature that balances the rights of God over humanity, huquq Allah, and the rights of humanity over each other, huquq al-abad. Scholars have derived various theories and frameworks based on Islamic perspectives, such as Padela's Islamic educational leadership theory and practice. Now, this comprehensive framework aligns with the teachings of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, providing valuable insights for educational leaders. What Padella did was that, using a grounded theory approach, he reveals that Islamic leadership comprises of two core categories. So the first one is modeling and directing behaviors and motivating followers towards a theocentric worldview. Now, these categories, the first one unfolds as personal leadership, the relationship with God and humanity, how to treat people, how to be adaptive based on the follower potential, and so on. Whereas the second category within Padella's framework developed the purpose of crafting an Islamic educational leadership model. So originally designed, this framework was designed in the context of K through 12 schools in the US, but this model definitely has scope to actually be adapted in the domain of higher education, as is done in this study. In the second category, two distinct themes were derived, and the first one focused on fidelity to God and his prophet. The themes emphasized active reflection, how we have to be an unwavering belief in the life after death, serving as the core properties of cultivating a theocentric worldview. The driving force between these themes is a constant reminder that a leader remains accountable to God for every action and decision, not just in the present, but here in the hereafter as well. The second theme underscores the importance of nurturing a faith-based identity. This involves serving the Ummah, maintaining familial ties, demonstrating social responsibility, and definitely avoiding harm to others through one's actions. Now, this again reinforces that Islamic educational leadership theory offers insights to reshape educational practices, fostering collaboration among all stakeholders. In order to carry out my study, the methodological approach that I took was an interpretivist discourse, and I utilized narrative inquiry as the method. Interpretivist because I wanted to understand their perspectives in their own words, and this was well documented by Clandon and Connolly by the use of narrative inquiry, and especially when it comes to educational stories. A way to understand experience, Clandon and Connolly say that it is through the telling of stories. And this is what I have used in my study. And narrative inquiry basically helps us to understand the lived stories and the told stories. So I was more interested in how the leaders narrate their own stories rather than me interpreting or making sense of what they are saying. So I wanted to capture their own way of telling their own stories. In order to do that, I conducted 3 60-minute interviews with the school leaders, with the school leader, and then I also observed the leader in her setting, which helped me construct detailed stories of her lived experiences. The different probes or questions that I used in a semi-structured interviews were: how do you define educational leadership? What is the influence of your local context, the Qatari context itself as you lead? How do you do decision-making? What is your specific leadership style, if you have any? Can you give me some examples of being a female leader, complementary experiences, challenging experiences, and what does it feel like to be a female leader in higher education? So this led me to develop a very good narrative of a leader whom I call her as Aisha, and her entire narrative, entire story became to be a very reflected Aisha as a critical, reflexive leader. So what Aisha said, I actually had the privilege of engaging in in-depth interviews with Aisha, and she was working in an international education and research platform institution while also teaching in higher education. So during the course of her discussions, Aisha shared her thoughts on leadership, and she emphasized that leadership is a very complex concept with various components. She believes that leadership involves guiding a team, setting a clear direction, having a vision, providing resources to bring that vision to life, and fostering collaboration within the team. Aisha's view on leadership is not, really based on the literature, but she derives it from her practical experiences. And then she said, it's more about us rather than me as a leader. One critical element Aisha highlighted in her leadership style is decision-making. She sees decision-making as a collaborative process aiming to empower her team members to make decisions, let it be big or small. Rather than providing answers, she prompts her team with questions, encouraging them to think critically and strategically. Now, this approach not only empowers her team, but also fosters team building. Now, Aisha also candidly discussed the challenges she faced as a female leader. She expressed her concerns that, about the job market, where highly qualified women in this context, like herself, are often offered positions that do not match her expertise and qualifications. So Aisha did acknowledge, the complexities of gender-related challenges in the workforce slightly, but although she said, being a female leader is tough, she acknowledged that Qatar as a nation has supported women in a lot in the recent years, especially for higher education, pursuing further studies and so on. Moreover, Aisha shared, her experiences of how she balanced her leadership role with the familial responsibilities. Aisha stressed that, when it comes to Islamic context, the focus is basically on what is permissible halal and what is prohibited haram, with an emphasis on right or wrong. While she actually recognized that leadership examples from the history of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, she also pointed out that she practices leadership from a wider spectrum of sources, given that what she has been exposed to, what she has read, and so on. So Aisha's heartfelt reflections revealed that the complexity of identifying the source of her leadership style, it is very difficult to draw a line between the Islamic and the Western influences, is what she was confessing. But she also expressed a disappointment that there is lack of reflection and connection to Islamic traditions in contemporary leadership practices. She argued that Western leadership theories have really been dominant for so long that they have become so deeply ingrained in our daily practices, overshadowing the potential contributions of the Islamic leadership context. She then said, the missing part is that we don't reflect or we don't relate to it in our own tradition. She emphasized that the research culture in her part of the world is still developing and that bridging the gap between Western and Islamic leadership theories could be a significant contribution. Aisha shed light, her reflections that leadership does not occur in isolation, but it is deeply intertwined with the individual she leads, the tasks at hand, and the timing of these endeavors. She illustrated how the competence of her team members plays a crucial role in shaping her leadership experiences. Aisha also emphasized that leadership is fundamentally a social activity, asserting that it does not exist in a vacuum. Leadership, she said, is a process of giving and taking. It is influenced by the people involved and the specific circumstances. So this perspective really reflected the socio-cultural nature of leadership, where interactions, communication, and mutual understanding are essential. When it comes to, the Islam and the culture, Aisha was very clear and said, we basically have more cultural influences rather than Islam here itself. So Islam on its own does not, discriminate between different genders, but it is more of a cultural influence that has been ingrained in the society. And culture basically operates under the disguise of Islam, whereas Islam empowers and supports me in my leadership role, is what Aisha was saying. In the final prompt, where what does Aisha feel like, as a female in the higher education context? Aisha said it is basically the importance of leading in the context of higher education, especially in her role. She approaches her position by emphasizing the teaching values and principles, making her sessions more engaging and interactive. And she said, she leads by driving the discussions, shaping the course material, and managing time effectively to meet students' expectations. So all of this story of Aisha, the narrative of Aisha, is very well overlapping with the Fadila's Islamic leadership theory and practice. So here you can very well see that through the different examples I have stated, that Aisha has been a very visionary leader. She was delegating tasks, she was responsible, empowering, she believed in, adaptive leadership, uplifting the follower capacity. And the concept of halal and haram was in her leadership practices. She was more into a collaborative and community-based leadership. So Aisha's leadership style embraces Islamic values, emphasizing the intention, the in-depth practices, and the way she communicates and behaves. She emphasizes the need to align these with the Islamic practices, right? So then, in addition to her story, another few more themes that came to light were the supports and challenges. So the support system, she did agree that, you know, the family has been a very strong support. The supervisors, while pursuing her doctoral studies and higher education, have been very supportive. Now, Qatar as a nation itself has been very supportive. But the challenges, on the other hand, has been the workload when it comes to balancing family and work and additional work at her workplace, but also the challenges was the misinterpretation of Islam against the backdrop of the culture. So the implications of my study are basically in the three dimensions. One is for the leaders, the other one is professional development for organizers, and the third one is for research. So the leaders, the impact of this study extends far beyond just the female leaders because it encompasses leaders of all genders across the globe. Leadership is an evolving and intricate phenomenon, so recognizing the importance of incorporating the cultural and religious heritage into leadership practices is essential. So if we could follow the teachings of Quran and Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ for Muslim educational leaders, it would be great and ultimately, you know, building that connection between faith and leadership and enhancing the effectiveness of their leadership roles. For the professional development, basically Qatar hosts, you know, several professional development programs for educational leaders. So it is crucial for organizers to design and develop such programs, keeping the context in mind and integrating the Islamic leadership framework into their curriculum. For research, well, this study actually is focusing on one leader's narratives. There is a lot of potential for broader research to be carried out in understanding the leadership experiences of several more female leaders. And this research basically presents a strong contribution, not only in advancing the understanding of Islamic leadership in educational context, but also in its applicability to leaders worldwide. Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm happy to present to you a topic of utmost significance, breaking barriers, women's scholarship and engagement in higher education leadership in Muslim societies. So this presentation delves into the challenges and opportunities that women face in pursuit of higher education leadership roles within Muslim societies. We will, you know, explore in this short video or presentation. We will explore the challenges, the theoretical framework, research questions, relevant literature, discuss the methodology adopted for this study, and present findings and ultimately draw conclusions about this critical subject. In terms of the theoretical and research questions that this study took into consideration, we have, for theoretical question, how do cultural, societal, and religious factors influence women's participation in higher education leadership roles in Muslim societies? So the research questions for the study were, what are the key cultural and societal barriers that hinder women from entering leadership positions in higher education within Muslim societies. How do religious interpretations and traditions impact women's education and leadership opportunities in these contexts? Are there any successful strategies or initiatives that have been implemented to promote women's participation in higher education leadership roles? And if so, what can we learn from them? And that led us into the literature review. So in the literature review, we looked at we have some key themes that shed light on the intricate relationship between cultural, societal, and religious factors when looking at the issue of women participation in higher education leadership within a Muslim society. In terms of the historical context, one of the works that was consulted is Ballo and Akbarzadeh in 2017. They talk about early Islamic history, witnessing the establishment of educational institutions known as madrasa, where women had access to education alongside men. Then in June 2006, also talk about Muslim majority countries limited due to various factors, including colonialism, patriarchal interpretation of Islamic teachings and things like that. Then on cultural norms and societal expectation, we have Al-Subaihi and Jones 2017 and Semir 2016. They talk about, cultural norms and societal expectations playing a significant role in shaping women's, participation in higher education leadership within Muslim societies. And, these norms often reinforce traditional gender roles, with women being expected to prioritize familial responsibilities over career ambitions. So cultural attitudes towards women's education, vary widely across Muslim majority countries, and that has led to divergent outcomes for women leadership in higher education. Then we have religious interpretation. Here we have Lassin et al. 2013. We also have Mahmoud 2005. So in these two works, we see how religious interpretation within Islam hold a pivotal place in influencing women's participation in leadership role in higher education. We see the Quranic principle of gender equality being interpreted differently by scholars and religious authorities, leading to varying degrees of inclusivity in the educational leadership role. Some interpretations also support women's active involvement in academia, while others restrict their participation based on conservative reading of Islamic texts. So the case studies were also looked at. We have the Qatar Foundation establishing programs that intend to empower and support women in academia. We have initiatives like Women in Science, Technology, Engineering, Mathematics program in Saudi Arabia, that aim to increase women presence in leadership position in higher education. If we check Lamiae and Sawalhi 2002, they discuss about this. So we notice that these are in terms of methodology that was used for this research. The research adopts a mixed method approach, which is combines qualitative and quantitative research, and the approach is chosen for, the ability to, provide comprehensive understanding of the subject matter. Some, the study conducted, qualitative interviews as one of the primary data collection, and interviews, were semi-structured with various stakeholders, women leaders, educators, policymakers within the Muslim society. So the data, when analyzed using thematic analysis, researchers, the research was coded and categorized based on the interview responses to uncover the common themes related to the barriers and opportunities for women in higher education leadership. So, and these were some of the methodologies that was adopted for the study, and the findings of the study. One of it is that cultural norms, often limits women's aspiration for leadership roles in higher education. Religious interpretation vary, but many women face barriers stemming from conservative interpretations. Initiatives that provide mentorship, leadership training, and support networks have been successful in promoting women's engagement in leadership positions. Also, regional variation exists, because some Muslim societies they are making greater strides in women's leadership in higher education than others. We have example from the programs to empower women academically and professionally. We have the Saudi Arabia Vision 2030 that aims to increase women's participation in the workforce and leadership position, including in higher education institutions. In Turkey, for instance, we have the Women Rectors Platform. It was established to promote female leadership in academia and helping women take on leadership roles in universities across the country. So these are some of the examples of variations that exist. And we can see that some countries are making greater strides in women leadership in higher education than others. So that led to the conclusion. And for us, I believe that the key takeaways from this study's presentation is the need to acknowledge and address cultural norms. Is crucial in promoting women's leadership in higher education. And there is need to engage with religious interpretations constructively, and that can open doors for women. Initiatives also that provide mentorship and support networks can be transformative. Context, also context matters, and solutions must be tailored to specific regions and societies. So I encourage all stakeholders, including educators, policy makers, civil societies, to consider these findings in their efforts to promote women's scholarship and engagement in higher education leadership within Muslim society. Together, we can, break the barriers that hinder progress and create a more inclusive, equitable future. Thank you for your attention. I thank you for the opportunity.
Hello, everyone. As you see, the title of my presentation is Muslim Female Leaders from the Past, Historical, Cultural, and Contextual Implications. This is a research that was conducted by Dr. Lamiae, Laghzaoui, Dr. Maysaa, Barakat, and myself. The outline is as follows: the introduction, then we are going to move to the problem statement, and we'll see the objectives and research questions. We'll also take a look at the literature review and the methodology, and then we'll share the findings. And at the end, we're going to give a conclusion. The problem statement of this research is as follows. It focuses on how women agency and leadership is viewed as a new concept brought by the West and imparted to other civilizations in modern times. And it also tries to shed a light on the misrepresentations of Muslim women in history, in particular, and religious women in general. And then also there are some assumptions about Muslim women being subdued and subjugated by men since early Islam. And also the assumption that Western civilization values have freed women from submission and brought them equality and emancipation, or at least they try to do so. So these are the issues that we wanted to focus on through our study. As you can see in this title of this slide, as Timothy Mitchell says, to become modern is to act like the West. And this is based on colonial theory. So one of the major objectives of this research is to challenge colonial theories and imperial assumptions about emancipation and leadership when it comes to women, and also how colonialism and imperialism suggest that Western powers during the era of colonialism and imperialism believed in superiority of the culture and values. They viewed the society as colonized as backward. They needed Western civilization's values, including gender equality. And this led to a perception that the West was civilizing or modernizing the societies. Also, it's kind of uncovering how Eurocentrism shows that European culture and Western values are superior and serve as a model for the rest of the world. And this ethnocentric view has contributed to the belief that the West brought progress, including women's emancipation to other religions. Therefore, our focus is to try to highlight how, for example, these ideas, as shown in this paragraph, are just based on colonialism and Eurocentrism, and they are not. They have no evidence in history in Islam. So, as you can see, Osmani et al. Wrote in 2019, non-Muslim writers assert that Islam has not only deprived the women of political rights, but they are also broadly neglected in Islam, socially, economically, and culturally. From the perspective of Islamic Orthodoxy, Islam raised the status of women in all aspects, but the focus of the Orthodox is only limited to social status of women. Thus, the objectives of our research is to look at geography books. These are history books that provide biographies of women in history. Mainly men in history. The ones that we looked at focus on men in medieval Islam or medieval Morocco. So our first objective is to scrutinize the role women played in medieval Islam in leading societies and educating people. The second objective is exploring the news of the emancipation of women in medieval Islam. And the third is to investigate the historical, cultural, and socioeconomic factors that have enabled these women to lead. You can see here two women from Morocco, Fatima al-Fihriya and Zainab al-Nabdawiya. So the question that we raised in this research is how have these women who led during medieval Morocco demonstrated leadership and agency? How were they perceived in their societies? What are the contextual, cultural, and historical factors that contributed to their leadership and agency? In order to do that, we have reviewed the literature around these questions, and we have focused on two aspects. The first one focuses on how Muslim women are portrayed in colonial discourse and Eurocentric frameworks, and how the colonial theory and research challenge these Eurocentric narratives by reframing women's identity, agency, and role in Muslim societies, while the second aspect focuses on how, for example, women or Muslim women were misrepresented in books and in history, and often neglected, and often their agency and resilience were neglected. That's what we call neglect of historical agency. And women have historically played, while women have historically played vital roles in various fields, including politics, scholarship, activism, and social change. And the second part of this second aspect is cultural insensitivity that is shown in some representations of Muslim women's history, which fail to recognize the cultural, ethnic, and regional diversity that shapes their identities and experiences, and have kind of skim and scan the literature around that. The theoretical framework we have used, we focus on it's a historical study of these Muslim women leadership and agency through first agency and empowerment through the colonial theory, using the colonial theory that highlight the agency of women, Muslim women, in shaping their own destinies and contributing to various aspects of society, and underscores that women have actively participated in leadership roles within the Islamic world throughout history. Then we focus on complex and diverse histories, showing that the colonial theory recognizes the complexity and diversity of Muslim women's historical experiences, but it emphasizes that Muslim women have held leadership positions in various fields, such as political, academia, religious scholarship, and social activism, contributing to the richness of Islamic civilization. And the last aspect of our theoretical framework is intersectional perspectives through the colonial theory that adopts an intersectional approach, acknowledging that Muslim women's leadership is influenced by various factors, including race, class, ethnicity, and regional context. This approach captures the multifaceted nature of their experiences. Hence, our methodology was sequential explanatory research design. First, we used a prosopographic approach. As you can see, prosopography is the investigation of the common background characteristics of a group of actors in history by means of a close study of their lives. Dr. Lamia Laghzaoui, who is a professor of history and researcher in history, has expertise in using prosopography in research in order to identify the characteristics of individuals and within groups. So which allowed us to come up with a number of identify a number of women in medieval Islam or medieval Morocco based on the theoretical framework that we have just seen. And then we have used the data that we have gathered to glean some qualitative data around the role, the leadership and agency of these women. So using hagiography books, so we collected data through hagiography books using a survey. The findings that we have had, we're going to focus more on the qualitative part of the study of the findings. The women we identified were religious scholars, political leaders, and educators who actively contributed to positive change. Their piety, gender, and social status did not make them submissive or dominated by male. They showed agency and leadership at different levels. They were admired and supported by men, and most men considered them leaders, scholars, and springs of knowledge. It's true that the hagiography books focus on men, so they were biographies of men, but through our prosopographic approach and through our survey, we tried to glean information about women who lived with these men and in these societies, and we have been successful in doing so. So we focus on their women's leadership and agency, and we have had ideas or data, qualitative data focusing on their vision and initiative, the vision and initiative of these women, their role in education and empowerment, their political leadership and activism, and their jurisprudence, leadership, and scholarship as well. We will focus on some examples. We're going to give some cases, case studies through 4 women. The first one shows leadership in political affairs. Some women in medieval Morocco held positions of political power, such as queen mothers, regents, and advisors to ruling dynasties. These women often played pivotal roles in court politics. And one example that we have, which is a notable figure, is Queen Zainab al-Nabzawiya, who served as a regent for her young son in the 10th century. The second example or case study shows women empowerment, how these women that we have identified played a role, an important role in women empowerment. And the example we have is Sayyida al-Hurra, who used to be a governor of Tetuan, a city in Morocco in the 16th century. And Sayyida al-Hurra's leadership and role as a powerful woman in a predominantly male-dominated society challenged traditional gender norms. Her position as a ruler and maritime leader served as an example of female empowerment and leadership. The third example shows how women played a role in Sufi and religious leadership. And the example we have is of a lady called Lamiae bint Ali, a revered Sufi saint. She was known for her spiritual teachings and her leadership in the Sufi tradition. Her influence extended beyond her lifetime. The last example we want to show is an example of professorship in crafts, and it's that of Sarah bint Ahmed bin Uthman bin Salah al-Halabi, nicknamed Halabiya and Fasiya, from Aleppo and Fes as well. So she came to Fes from Aleppo in Syria, and she was a professor of poets and a skilled doctor who had a prominent position in literature, and she mastered various crafts. Now, the implications that we have drawn from these studies show a new perspectives. The first one is how questions like women leadership and agency in modern societies need to be reframed differently instead of applying traditional gender binary lenses and other Western methods to investigate them. And the second one shows how culture, family, social status are some of the variables that can contribute to understanding such an issue, and being sensitive to these variables might provide us with implications and understanding of the role these women played, instead of just applying one framework to studying the role of these women in society. So that framework, especially if it's Eurocentric, might hide a number of contributions that these women have had in society. As a conclusion, we want to highlight four major elements. The first one is recognition of women's agency. That's what these studies show, that this study highlights, is that women's agency in medieval Islam in the 12th, 13th, 14th century, and beyond that, probably 2 centuries post medieval Morocco, showed that these women had agency, and that this agency needs to be recognized, even if it's not clear in the books that we have studied, but using novel approaches like prosopography can highlight this agency. There is a complex interplay of gender and religion, so we cannot use a binary framework to study the role of these women through gender as it is applied in Western cultures or Western studies. Cultural and regional contexts matters a lot. So understanding how these regional contexts and cultural contexts, as well as the history, affects how women are portrayed or how women contribute to their societies is also of great importance. And the last important aspect is documentation and preservation. So we wish there is more research that can document and preserve this Islamic history and these Islamic traditions, and highlights and showcases how these women were leaders and had agency at that time, which shows that leadership and agency are not new concepts brought by the West to Muslim countries or Southern countries in general. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good timing, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity and allowing us to be presenting here and sharing some of our work. On behalf of Ghiath, Hawari, and myself, would like to share some of the insights that we have gained about women education leadership and career guidance. So my colleague Ghiath is well known for promoting design thinking, social innovation labs, and business strategy, in addition to working with youth and character building. You can find a lot if you Google his name or you go to LinkedIn. I'm also honored to share with you some of my insights that I gained through my education leadership about teacher leadership, contributing also to women leadership, as I worked as a former principal in K-12 and teacher, in addition to higher education and research and teaching, in addition to contributing to many initiatives around the world, for example, International Congress of School Effectiveness and Improvement Education Leadership Network, leading for innovation in education, and also co-founder of Women Ed MENA. I'm happy to share with you some of those insights that I also gained as a mother of 5, and my experience with my colleagues as a Muslim women in different countries around the world. So the work that we will be going through, we're going to have an overview, quick overview about the glossary, about context, our approach, and some of the findings that we had gained so far. As I always start, I would like to emphasize our definition of education leadership. When we talk about education, we're talking about a comprehensive approach. We're talking about the development of the whole individual learners. And we're talking about leadership, we're talking about the process of nurturing and developing the whole person, including knowledge, skills, attitudes, attributes, so that we would have a positive outcome. Because unfortunately, sometimes we have negative or unwanted kind of outcomes, but we want to focus on formal, informal settings, in person or virtual. So it's a whole process. And we're talking about career. We're not talking about job or profession. We're talking about the path that individuals takes as a lifestyle. So all the activities, goal-directed activities that individual engages in to develop their learning. And if you want to go and explore more within the Asian Pacific Career Development Association glossary, you would find lots regarding career, job, vocation, calling, and we have a long list of that. Another thing that we're talking about career guidance. And there are lots of kind of definitions regarding career readiness, career development, different things. What we're referring here in our work is about the services to help individuals at any age. And this is following the UNESCO definition so that they can develop and plan for their careers, which we had defined earlier. And there to make their education, training, choices meaningful for them. And as you all know, career guidance goes within many assessments. It might go through interest, qualifications, skills, others. We're including all that and hope that in the future, we're talking about future, and our definition is not only in this life, but it's also in afterlife. I know it's lots of grossly. So we have women, we have education leadership, and we have career guidance. And we were talking about women, there are lots of theories. You can have the list on my left hand, so that there are things related to roles, there are things related to conflict, choice therapy, there are transition theory. There are lots of theories that try to address how women would go through career guidance and career kind of readiness programs. In addition, one of my colleagues, Hillary, tried to work on working like a mother. However, we have our own way of defining and dealing with women needs. So it's not about being equal to men as much as understanding their uniqueness and dealing with their needs differently, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator, had assigned us to specific roles. And we need to make sure that they are addressed, they are supported, and they are explored, giving the opportunity to have different planning and different ways. In this study, we had followed 2 theoretical frameworks. We're talking about Women Ecological Education Leadership Model that I worked with my colleagues in one of our books, and also design thinking. So this is the book. You have the QR code if you like to go through it. And we're talking about this model that I will just mention quickly. Start with the self-empowerment. This is something really needed. So how women themselves, they can understand their selves, they can reflect, and they can communicate. And that would take us to another concept of this model, which is role modeling, that accepting different roles and sharing stories. Stories mean success stories and failure, because that's part of the learning process. In addition, being able to work on mentorship and this kind of relationship to build capacities and to share and to build different types of knowledge and to transform, kind of transformative leadership skills. In addition, this all need to be supported within entrepreneurship and within a society, within a community building. It's not only women themselves, but it was better to be part of different roles and different levels. And we're talking about self-awareness. It's important that to mention we have different selves. We have historical self, we have the biological, the culture, the political. There are lots of things that we need to refer to, specifically when we're talking about Arab women in Arab countries. And we were talking about design thinking. This is not a new concept. So it started in around 1960s. There are different levels and it had evolved till we have the level of IDEO that we're following. And we define design thinking as a process of accelerated problem solving. So it's a problem solving, but it's accelerated. And it gives deeper understanding of the oneself. And we consider women exploring themselves and working on themselves. This is part of solving the problems that they face so that they would plan for their careers and plan for their futures. And we're talking about design thinking is not a linear process. So we go through identifying the challenge, working with the user, which in this case, ourselves, and also as women, and also trying to generate ideas, solutions, then to test, which is really important within the design thinking approach. And you can tell from the process that I will be describing, we work on interviews, field research. We also talk about literature analysis, not only from Western context, but also from our Arabic, Muslim, classical resources that we have to test and develop, which enabled us to develop our own model that we started working on as part of the Soft Fortune that had been awarded Innovative Award 2020 within XE GPCC Innovation Award. And we also had worked on that as a talenter for a different version. The first one was for undergraduate, and the second one was for women in different ages and different roles. When we talk about Arab countries, it's important to know that we're talking about around 23 countries. We share commonalities in language and in religion. However, the social, economic, there are lots of differences, especially that this is a conflict zone and crisis area. As many of you know about Syria, Palestine, Yemen, Libya, and many other countries in many different situations. So women in our society face lots of displacement for different reasons, even if they're moving from one country to a wealthy country. So that's something else that they're working on. The research questions that we had been working on is to see how the participants had received the application of design thinking and career guidance process, in addition to any improvements that they were looking for. So we interviewed around 15 participants that they had been through programs that we had developed from Palestine, Jordan, Yemen, Iraq, and Syria, Saudi Arabia, in addition to Saudi Arabia. Those narratives explored formal and informal women education leadership practices and how career guidance helped them in those kind of settings. And one of the important results that we had found that all of them had been enabled to have or to adapt the growth mindset that they can do and they can develop their skills, positive impact, and being proactive. And we're talking about thinking as a designer. It means that they are optimistic. They're looking at the bigger picture, not only a small, tiny piece of the challenge that they are facing, and they work together in different communities, either face-to-face or virtual, and they always work in trial and error to test what they are trying to do, in addition to understanding themselves, communicating their needs, and also understanding others. So some of the main findings that we would like to share with you at this stage: motherhood. 2 participants had been navigating many of the opportunities, how to develop resources for their children and friends. It's not only to work as an entrepreneurs, but also how to connect educational aspects into their examples and into their programs and into their initiatives. Even if it's catering, they were aiming to transfer some of the knowledge from their home countries to the new place that they had moved and shifted to. One of the other findings that we find it really interesting about religion. So they're not only kind of a false hope, they were, it was embedded in their beliefs and their, considering that part of their good deeds and referring it to religion, and as part of building their resilience. All participants had been referring to networks to support each other and to be mentoring. And one of them gave an example of how she established reading group to discuss selected books to help and support female students in her community, although it was a different place and environment, so that they each can support each other through storytelling embedded within the books that they were discussing. So we talked about motherhood and mentoring, and we also mentioning about entrepreneurship, where all participants had initiated their small businesses within their local communities, either the ones that they stayed in or when they moved to other ones. And they're trying to educate and provide support to other women. One of the participants, she mentioned that she started her cooking classes just to help a newly married to master the art of preparing traditional Syrian food. So we have lots of recommendations, but some of them that we would like to focus on is, it's better if we have a mixed method so that we have gained more insights from different dimensions. It's also important to share resources in Arabic, especially for Muslim women, not only to rely on Western traditional practices or modern practices, because sometimes they would lose that track if they're just relying it without embedded within their identity. And we need to have lots of awareness campaigns just to inform them about the availability of these resources and how they can support each other. There are lots to discuss about career guidance, about what exactly they need to do and how to identify the resources and deal with their own self-empowerment. Thank you, everyone. Looking forward to discussion and questions.
And that concludes our presentations. What a great way to end this symposium by talking about women and leadership. And I think I myself got lots of insights and ideas, but there are also some buzzwords that were repeated in the 4 presentations that we heard. Let's start with the questions here in the audience, if you have any.
Dr. Tasneem and Dr. Rania, if they can go more into details about their methodology and how did they select their participants?
Did you hear? And yeah, thank you for video, and you can unmute to respond. The question is regarding your methodology, but it was directed to Tasneem and
Rania.
And Rania. Yeah. Tell us more about your methodology.
How they went about.
Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a question for both Dr. Tasneem and Rania. I really enjoyed your presentations. If you can just elaborate more on your methodology and how you went about selecting your participants, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So while for selecting the participants, it was indeed a little challenging, despite, trying to get some snowball sampling done here and also reaching out to my personal contacts, like purposefully selecting some leaders whom I know. But it was actually surprising to me that some of the educational leaders, Muslim educational leaders, were a little hesitant in the first place to participate in a qualitative, narrative inquiry research. And that in itself says that, the qualitative research requires more effort and time. And the female leaders were cognizant of that. Well, I approached to about 15-20 leaders, and I created like individual narratives of about 5 in the end. And some of the reasons why when I met them in person, they thought that initially they accepted the invite via email. But when I met them in person, they thought like, okay, where's the survey? I can just complete it and give it out to you. So the challenge was basically to get, leaders who were willing to spend time, reflect on their experiences and share their stories in depth. So basically the participant selection was more a combination of, convenience sampling, a little bit of snowballing sampling happened. And, very purposefully, I chose a few people who were in my contacts. In terms of the interviews and, in order to develop the in-depth narrative of a female leader, in my case, I actually had about 5, one-to-one interviews lasting to about 60 to 90 minutes each. And I also did observations of the school leaders while they were like actively in their leadership role. So, the observations were about 3 observations when they were meeting with their team members, or, when they were like just casually doing their, day from clock in to clock out kind of. So I did 3 of those observations and then 5 of those in-depth interviews. So that helped me, craft an in-depth narrative of one female leader. I hope this was helpful.
Yes, and Rania?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you, everyone. I'm so sorry that I was not able to join you, and I hope in the future for sure. Regarding the 15 ladies that had participated with us, they had involved within the career guidance programs that we have designed following design thinking approach. So out of more than 300 who participated within the undergraduate and the Talenter programs, we asked them who would like to be interviewed and to be part of the study. 15 of them had participated, and their profiles, 5 of them were from Palestine, 2 from Syria, from Yemen. So each one had come from a different country. All of them has bachelor's backgrounds, and they completed the program that we had designed as a career guidance and developing women competencies, which we had identified regarding social responsibility, career guidance, communication, and for their own self-discovery. So that was part of that training that we had provided, if I answered your questions. And it's really important to see the progress and how their insights had gained when they focused on the circle of influence or circle of concern, what exactly that they would be able to be assessing, evaluating, and also working on changing within the things that the resources that they have already within their small communities, either at home or within the bigger community. I hope that's clarified.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, thank you, Rania. Rania and Tasneem. Rania, since we have you on, there's a question online. I think you probably saw it. It also relates to the information about the profile of the 15 people sample group in your study. Can you provide some more information on that?
Sure. So as I mentioned, those 15 ladies, we have 5 from Palestine, we have 2 from Syria, we have 1 from Yemen, and 1 from Morocco, and 1 from Iraq, if I'm doing the math correctly. And when we did the semi-structured interviews, we also observed their progress within the program and the training and what kind of projects that they had developed. So it was analyzing the narrative that they had shared with us, and also seeing and observing what kind of projects that they had been working on and what they had concluded on their impact within the storytelling and within the mentoring within their communities. And also regarding, all of them has bachelor degree, all of them had working experience before, but they had faced displacement, as I had mentioned. So the Syrian ladies had moved from Syria to Turkey. The Palestinian ladies, some of them, they still remain in other places in Palestine, but not in their original cities. So each one of those cases, that would be clarified further in the study when published.
Wonderful, thank you. I saw like 2 threads across the 4 presentations, which I'm interested in. One is the idea of mentorship. It was mentioned in several of the presentations, and even with the presentation looking back at history, I think that there is another piece that I saw, or maybe was lacking, was not emphasized, is the role of education in K-12 to prepare for leadership later on in higher education. So, in your opinion, Dr. Abdelaziz, or others, if you're interested in unpacking this a little bit, how does mentorship look like if we start it early? Do we need to start it early? And within these Islamic models, most of you described, what would mentorship look like, if at all? But I think for you, really mostly the implications of your analysis of these historical figures in the context of Morocco, what are the implications for those girls who are sitting in schools in 6th or 5th grade today?
Actually, this is a very, very good question, because looking at women through history in Islam, it's not just doing studies about history. It's really looking at what we have now. It's So if you look at what I presented, it focuses on discourse provided by colonialists and imperialists, but at the same time, it's a very good perspective for the colonized as well, for those of us who were colonized, how we see things. And I think that if we focus on K-12 or school in general, I would bring forward the process of learn and relearn. And I think using those stories from history or even stories from the present, looking at even scholars we have today and leaders we have today, and we have two wonderful scholars with us who have presented, Dr. Rania Sawalhi and Dr. Tasneem. So these stories can serve as examples to learn and relearn, and see Islam from different perspectives. So instead of just focusing, because I always have a story in my mind about a student who was in my classes 1 year, and she was brilliant. She works very, very hard to progress, and she got a scholarship from Morocco to go study in France. But then she rejected it. She just turned it down. And when I asked her why, she said, well, it's because I cannot travel by myself alone. And I think that type of perspective needs to be challenged somehow. And I even asked her, so how did you get that? And she said, okay, I got in touch with some scholars around the Arab world, and they told me that you cannot travel on a plane alone, and issues like these. Probably we're not going to get into the debate about that now because time does not allow. But I think that's how we should use our history to show that we did have leaders, female leaders, women who impacted, well, policy, pedagogy, and development, as I see in the title of this symposium, and that these people were not, there is to say their lives were not hurdled or hindered by Islam or Sharia or anything that relates to Islam. That's why we have one slide in my presentation that shows that there is a kind of a dichotomy between cultural Islam and true Islam. So that's the perspective.
Yes, thank you for that. Dr. Abdulgafar, would you like to talk a little bit about mentorship? Because you also talked about that and how to unpack it within the Nigerian context. Are you with us?
Okay, yes. Okay, so you are talking about mentorship. So for younger female or young girls, actually my work does not really go into that, but I believe mentorship is very, very important for young girls to, achieve their goals, to achieve their aims. So it is something that should be, looked into, should be encouraged in order for more opportunities can be created. The area I think I can mention is in terms of, the women organizations that, we have in Nigeria here. I think they've been serving that role of mentorship. We have quite a number of popular Muslim women organizations. For example, the Federation of Muslim Women Association of Nigeria, Form 1, is one of the leading women organizations in Nigeria. They've been championing issues related to hijab and also issues related to empowerment of women and things like that. So mentorship is really, really important, and it's something that we need to, encourage many of the Muslim women leaders to, look into and see how they can encourage it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Will we take a final question from the audience here? Any final questions?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I would like to thanks for all presenters. They are a nice presentation. I would like to a question for all presenters. How we can create female leadership, women's leadership in all areas, in education sector and business and cultural sector, any others. Because in this world, there is many barriers for women's creating leadership in all sectors. How we create women's leadership in this world at present time? Thank you.
You want to direct it to one person? Or maybe anyone would like to take this on?
Yeah,
I
I
think
have lots
the
to
presentation
mention
was all
about.
about that actually. How do we create women leadership? And yeah, so any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Can I start?
Well, let's okay, go ahead, please.
So thank you very much for this question. That's really a timely needed one. For me, in all of my work, what I do first is to redefine leadership when I'm talking about women, because the kind of normal way of talking about leadership or conceptualizing it doesn't work with women. The second thing, in everything related to all my research or my contributions or my training for ladies, we need to make sure that they are aware of their uniqueness, especially when we're talking in Muslim societies, and they're not trying to go with the laws that had been designed for males and try to voice their experience and voice their needs, which is something that's really important. And the third thing, when we're talking about women and leadership in all aspects, and that's one of the findings, that we need to help them to see the type of influence that they are making. And part of the education leadership, and that's something you would read in the book that had been published, we consider education, motherhood, as one of the education leadership components, so that she has this influence, she has this kind of educational role in teaching and learning and nurturing and the process of what we say it, but it's not in the formal setting or K-12 or higher ed. So women need to see their input, their influence differently. And when we're talking and defining in those kind of different sectors, we need to allow, and she needs to allow herself to think about the needs and the circumstances, the ways that we're going to contribute, and not to follow the rules and the guidelines that had been guided to like one size fits all for everyone, like male and female. I appreciate there are some kind of regulations that we need to follow. However, we need to address that there are specific things, kind of flexibility in the working hours, different formats, different ways, different needs, the place, the location, everything need to be reconsidered when those ladies want to contribute. So for the ladies themselves to, or women, females themselves to be aware of those needs and the future kind of aspect, like what exactly we see. The second thing that's important is the storytelling, the mentoring one, because regardless, we're not talking only about success stories, we're talking about all stories. So when I saw that there is another lady, she's facing those kind of different challenges and she's trying her best, that also is influencing me and giving and inspiring me to continue. That's part of leadership that we're going through. So it's not only to see the top of the achievements that she had so far, it's the process of what she's trying to achieve and where she's going and where she's heading. And that goes for all aspects and those kind of all disciplines that we're referring to. And when mentoring is happening directly and indirectly, so like we're in the setting, we're definitely influenced by many, like either within the type of presentation or the things that they're sharing or working. So there's kind of relationship that we need to reflect on, especially within our Muslim societies. What exactly the role of women, and what Abdelaziz was referring to, Dr. Abdelaziz, is that what is the difference between Islam and the culture or the Islamic perspective taken from that culture. There are many things that those ladies need to, but how we vision the futuristic studies related in each discipline instead of reacting and just following the steps of what's happening at the moment, which does not reflect either our needs or the major maqasid sharia that we're referring to. I hope that covers what I can speak forever. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Rania. And actually, you answered the question that we had online regarding like how much can we expect of women doing all sorts of entrepreneurships when they have full-time jobs, when they're teachers, for example, and when they're doing so many things, like where are our expectations and definitions of leadership? Thank you for that. Dr. Abdelaziz,
Actually, the first thing I would like to focus on might be a little bit challenging to the question itself. So I don't know if we would ask the question saying, how do we create men leaders? So you don't hear this question very often. You hear the question, how do we create women leaders? And this testifies to the fact that women are still having some barriers, which these barriers sometimes are just psychological. That is to say, they have to do with our mindsets, how we perceive the women leadership. So I think probably the first thing we need to focus on is first recognize that there are women leaders and that there are female leaders, that even at, you talked about K-12, that even at K-12, or when they are children, they can lead and they are leaders. We recognize that. So probably one thing we have to focus on as well is language, how we use this force, because it's important. Now, the way we use language might affect how we perceive leaders, either women leaders or men leaders, or boys leading or girls leading. So it's also the language used, and that relates to the socialization process, starting with homes, for example. How do we assign roles at home? It's also very, very important. Whether we see the boys as leaders or we see the girls as leaders. So that's also something that we need to take into consideration. And something else is about mindset. I think if we go beyond our fears, so if we focus on the fear we have, or how, for example, in patriarchal society, most of the times, men are like triggered by fear when they see women leading, and all those, social psychological perceptions that when women lead, something is going to happen, and most of the time they focus on the negative that is going to happen, and that also needs to be challenged. And I think that these are some of the elements that need to be seen and challenged in our society. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Tasneem, you get the final words on this?
Yeah.
Tasneem.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So I'd like to actually continue the conversation or the thoughts that Dr. Rania and Dr. Abdelaziz mentioned. When the question was posed, the first thing that came to my mind was the World Economic Forum's Gender Gap Report. And, we have very striking data in there that the female enrollment in higher education is way more than men. But the females in the labor market force is lesser than the men. So what is exactly happening there, that transition from after they've graduated till into the workforce? And that's where I think, the loads of mentoring, the leaders in the higher education can play a major role. The report also highlights that, the education field itself is actually, top. We have many females in there, but when we see the other sectors like entrepreneurial, STEM-related fields, we see the numbers keep declining. And now here we as researchers and scholars, I think we'll have to further, see, because the field of education, the K through 12 or the higher education, now that's the starting zone of where we can mold and, where we can transform the minds of younger generations. So I think for our community specifically, it would be very nice to have, role models, to have more mentoring happening right from the beginning, so we can try and bridge those gaps. And hence, we can in the long term. It's not a short-term achievement or accomplishable goal. It has to have a long-term plan, and we need to engage all the stakeholders in education, from the policymakers to the students, parents, the communities, all together coming in. I think we can see the numbers or the facts changing, actually the figures changing. What's interesting, another thing from the World Economic Forum's report is the boys actually need, the gender gap is more towards the boys there now. Women have been empowered, and that has been in the talks so long now, that men need more attention and support. What is happening to the boys? I mean, why are they less in the higher education field? Where are they disappearing, especially in this part of the world, if you see the GCC region? So there is so much to actually explore and investigate further, but this needs a long-term agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry, I have to conclude because we have a very tight schedule today. Thank you so much for our presenters online and our participants online. Thank you for being here.